Mrs. Karen adjusted the strap of her handbag as she walked toward the gate of Bright Future Academy. The sun was already blazing over Lagos, and the sound of honking cars and busy traders filled the air. She checked her wristwatch, 2:30 p.m., right on time. As usual, Mr. Moses, the Keke Napep driver, was waiting near the school entrance. His yellow tricycle gleamed under the sun, looking as clean as ever. He was a man in his early 40s, dark-skinned, with a slim build and an ever-present smile that made him look friendly. He had been carrying her two children, David, 10, and Sandra, 8, to and from school for nearly a year now. "Mama David, good afternoon, Ma," Mr. Moses greeted, tipping his cap respectfully. "Good afternoon, Moses. Hope you're fine." Mrs. Karen responded warmly. "Yes, Ma. I dey well," he replied in a mixture of English and Pidgin. Just then, David and Sandra ran out of the school gate, their faces lighting up at the sight of their familiar Keke. "Mommy," Sandra called out, hugging her mother before climbing into the tricycle. "How was school today?" Mrs. Karen asked, smoothing David's hair. "Fine, Mommy," he replied. As she helped them settle in, she turned to Mr. Moses. "Please take them home safely, as always." "Oh, madam, you no get problem. You trust me, no," he said with his usual grin. Mrs. Karen smiled back, completely unaware that the man she trusted with her children's lives was about to betray that trust in the worst way possible. Over time, Mr. Moses had become more than just a driver, he was like a family friend. He knew their schedules, their habits, even what snacks Sandra liked to eat after school. On some days, he would buy them groundnuts or sweets from the roadside, and the children adored him for it. Mrs. Karen, a successful businesswoman, was always busy managing her boutique. Her husband, Mr. Richard, worked in Abuja and only visited home occasionally. With their hectic lives, Mr. Moses had become a trusted figure in their household. But no one truly knew him. At night, when Lagos quieted down, Mr. Moses became someone else entirely. He lived in a small, dingy one-room apartment in an area most people avoided. His walls were bare, except for a single, worn-out photo of a young boy. He often sat in the darkness, staring at that picture, his jaw tightening with every passing second. "Dem go feel the pain way I feel," he muttered to himself one night, his fingers tightening into fists. Something was boiling inside him, a storm of anger and revenge. It was a Wednesday afternoon when everything changed. As usual, Mr. Moses waited outside Bright Future Academy. Mrs. Karen had called earlier to say she had an urgent meeting and wouldn't be home until later. "Just drop them at the house as usual," she had instructed over the phone. Mr. Moses smiled to himself. Perfect. David and Sandra hopped into the Keke, laughing about something that had happened in class. They barely noticed that their friendly driver was unusually quiet. He started the engine. But today, instead of heading straight home, he took a different route. A much darker, lonelier road. Sandra was the first to notice. "Uncle Moses, this is not our street," she said, her small voice filled with confusion. Mr. Moses kept driving. David frowned. "Uncle, where are we going?" Still, Mr. Moses said nothing. Sandra's voice rose with fear. "Uncle Moses, Mommy said you should take us home." Then, for the first time, Mr. Moses turned to look at them, and the warmth in his eyes was gone. "Just be quiet," he said in a tone so cold that it sent shivers down their spines. Sandra started crying. David's heart pounded. Something was very, very wrong. The Keke Napep sped down the deserted road, disappearing into the unknown. Mrs. Karen stepped out of her boutique, stretching after a long day. She checked her watch, 5:45 p.m. The kids should have been home by now. She dialed the housemaid, Aisha. "Hello, Aisha, have David and Sandra reached home?" A brief silence. "No, Ma. I never see them." Mrs. Karan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "Moses left with them from school hours ago." "I no, Ma. I just know say them never reach house." She quickly dialed Mr. Moses' number. It rang twice, then switched off. Fear clutched her chest. Something was terribly wrong. She grabbed her car keys and sped toward the school, calling everyone she could think of, her husband, the school teachers, fellow parents. But no one had seen or heard from Moses. By the time she reached Bright Future Academy, the sun was already setting. "Madam, I see Moses carry your pikin them go since afternoon," the security guard said. "Not the same way him they follow every day." Mrs. Karan's blood turned cold. Her children were missing. That night, Mrs. Karan sat in the police station, filing a missing persons report. Then, her phone rang. Unknown number. With trembling hands, she answered. "Hello." A chilling voice came through the line. "If you want to see your children alive, don't go to the police again." Her breath caught in her throat. "Who are you? Where are my children?" 10 million naira. "You have 48 hours. No police. No tricks. Or you'll never see them again." The call ended. Mrs. Karan's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor, screaming. Her babies were in the hands of a madman. Trapped in the dark. David and Sandra sat on the floor of a dark, empty room. The air smelled damp, and the only light came from a tiny window covered in rusty iron bars. Sandra had been crying non-stop, her small body trembling. David held her close, whispering, "Don't worry. Mommy will come for us." But deep inside, even he was terrified. Mr. Moses sat on a plastic chair, watching them. His face was no longer friendly. It was cold. Unforgiving. "Uncle Moses," David finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Why are you doing this? I thought you liked us." Moses' eyes darkened. "It's not about you, boy. It's about justice." David didn't understand. "What justice?" Mr. Moses clenched his jaw, his fist tightening. "Your family destroyed mine." David's heart pounded. What was he talking about? Before he could ask, Moses stood up and left the room, locking the door behind him. Back at home, Mrs. Karan frantically called her husband, Richard, who was still in Abuja. "You have to come back immediately," she cried. "Calm down, Karan. What happened?" She explained everything between sobs. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then, Richard whispered, "Moses. I know that name." Mrs. Karan froze. "What do you mean?" Her husband sighed deeply. "Many years ago, I had a business deal that went bad. A man lost everything because of me. His name was Moses Okonkwo." Her blood turned cold. "You mean, this is revenge?" "Maybe. I didn't think he would go this far," Richard stammered. "I swear, Karen, I never imagined." "Richard, my children are in danger because of you," she screamed. But Richard had already ended the call. Inside the dark room, David's sharp mind was at work. He studied the room, looking for a way out. Then, he saw it, the window bars were rusty. "Sandra," he whispered, "we can escape through the window." Sandra sniffled. "But how?" David stood on tiptoe, pressing against the bars. They wobbled. He smiled. "We can do this." But just as they started pushing, the door creaked open. Moses stood there, watching them. "Trying to escape?" he asked coldly. David's heart pounded. Moses stepped forward, then stopped. He stared at David for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Was it hesitation? Then, without another word, he walked away and locked the door again. David exhaled. But deep inside, he knew. Time was running out. Mrs. Karen was pacing in her living room, her mind racing. 48 hours. 10 million naira. No police. Her husband, Richard, had finally arrived from Abuja, looking visibly shaken. "This is my fault," he muttered, rubbing his face. "Save the guilt for later, Richard. We need to find our children." Karen snapped. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but there was no time for weakness. They had contacted the police, despite the kidnappers' warning. The officers had advised them to stay calm, but Karen couldn't sit and wait. "We have to do something," she whispered, gripping Richard's arm. "What if he—" Her voice broke. She couldn't even say it. Richard nodded. "I'll get the money." David and Sandra were cold, hungry, and terrified. Sandra had cried herself to sleep, her head resting on David's lap. David sat awake, staring at the locked door. He had to find a way out. Mr. Moses had barely spoken to them all day. He only came to check on them, bringing stale bread and water. But this time, when he entered, David gathered his courage. "Uncle Moses," he said, standing up. Moses glanced at him. "What?" David's small fist clenched. "Why do you hate us?" Moses exhaled slowly, sitting on the wooden stool by the door. "Your father ruined my life." David frowned. "How?" Moses' face darkened. 10 years ago, I had a wife and a son. I invested all my savings into a business deal with Richard. He promised me wealth, but in the end, he betrayed me. I lost everything." David listened, confused but scared. "My wife left me. My son, he died of an illness because I had no money for treatment," Moses continued, his voice cracking. "And your father, he went on with his life like nothing happened." David swallowed hard. "But it wasn't our fault." Moses' eyes glistened with unshed tears. "No, but now your father will know my pain." Before David could respond, Moses' phone rang. He stepped outside to answer it. David's heart pounded. This was their chance. David shook Sandra awake. "Sandy, wake up." She groggily opened her eyes. "David, we have to go. Now." He ran to the window and tested the bars. They were old and rusty. "Help me push." Sandra, still weak, joined him. They pressed their small hands against the bars and pushed with all their strength. Outside, Moses was shouting into his phone. "I told you, no police. If I see anything suspicious, you'll never see them again." Inside, the window bars creaked. Then, crack. One side came loose. David's heart raced. They were almost free. But just as they pushed harder, the door burst open. Moses stood there, eyes blazing with rage. "You want to run?" he thundered. Sandra screamed as Moses grabbed David by the collar. "You think you're smart, boy?" David struggled, kicking and fighting, but Moses was too strong. He dragged them back, locking the window. "You just made things worse for yourselves," he growled. The next morning, Mrs. Karen received another call. "Meet me at the abandoned warehouse by mile 12. Bring the money. Come alone." The line went dead. She turned to Richard. "We have to go now." "But..." "No time for debate, Richard," she snapped. With the police watching from a distance, Karen drove to the warehouse. Her hands shook as she held the bag containing 10 million naira. As she stepped inside, she saw Moses standing there, with a gun. "Where are my children?" she demanded. Moses pointed to the far side of the warehouse. David and Sandra were tied to chairs. "Let them go, Moses," she cried. Moses smirked. "Give me the money first." Karen tossed the bag towards him. Moses bent to check inside. That was the moment the police made their move. Moses spun around in shock. Police officers stormed the warehouse. Bang! A single gunshot rang out. Sandra screamed. Moses clutched his bleeding shoulder and collapsed. The police rushed forward, securing the area. Karen ran to her children, sobbing as she untied them. "You're safe now. Mommy's here," she cried, hugging them tightly. David, still shaking, whispered, "Mommy, he wanted to hurt us." Karen turned to Moses, who lay on the ground, groaning in pain. For a moment, she saw not a monster, but a broken man. "I just wanted justice," Moses muttered, his voice weak. The police took him away. Days later, as things settled, Richard sat with Karen in their living room. "I never meant to ruin anyone's life," he said, guilt heavy in his voice. Karen sighed. "But you did. And we almost lost our children because of it." They sat in silence. Meanwhile, in a prison cell, Moses sat alone, staring at the wall. He had lost. But deep inside, he didn't regret it. The pain had been shared.